We were discussing yesterday the idea about not having mitzvahs that are bezuyes Allah. We shouldn't be disgusted by mitzvahs, which means that anything that's associated with a mitzvah we do with respect, with honor, even something like covering the blood from shchita, when slaughtering an animal, the way that we treat that blood that follows is also done with reverence. You don't trample on it, you cover it up, because mitzvahs have to be done in a respectful and honorable way. In that vein, we're continuing in regards to the candles of Hanukkah. Itmar, we learned in a brayso, Rav Amar Rav said, Ein madlikin miner liner. We know that you can't light from the menorah, you can't light a cigarette, right? Or any other candle from the candles of the menorah. It's forbidden. But Rav said you can't even light one candle of the menorah from the other one. That's why we have a shamish. And the shamish is used as the one that we light, and from there we light all the other ones. You don't take from one candle to the other. That's Rav's opinion. Shmuel argues, Shmuel Amar, he says you could, madlikin. You can't use it for foreign stuff, for just a regular candle you want in your house, but you could use it for lighting another candle of the menorah. That would be okay. That's the two opinions. Yosef Ahume Rabbanon Kameid of Ada bar Ava. There was a certain sage who was sitting in front of another teacher by the name of Rav Ada, the son of Ava. The Yosef, he was sitting, and he said as follows. You want to know the reason for Rav, why he says it's forbidden, and Shmuel says it's permitted to light one candle to the other? Tama de Rav Mishum Bizui Mitzvah, because it's a disgrace to the mitzvah if you're using a lighting from one candle for the other. It's not appropriate. It's not respectful for that candle. Amar lehu. So he, Rav Ada bar Ava, who heard this, he said, "Whoa, 1 second. Don't listen to that reasoning. What he just said, don't pay attention. It's not accurate. Rather, the reason why Rav said you're not allowed to light one candle from the other, because you're weakening a mitzvah. You're taking away from one candle, which is a mitzvah, to the other candle. Now, normally we know that when you light another candle, you're not weakening any part of the candle, right? You could light as many candles as you want with one flame. It doesn't get less. But at the same time, the Farshim explained that when you start to light from one to the other, you're taking some of the oil, some of the fuel that's behind it, and you're using it for this one. Don't do it. And that would be the reason for Rav. My Beinayu, what's the difference between these two opinions? Two reasonings. Who cares? Is the reason because it's not respectful, or is the reason because you're weakening the mitzvah? What's the difference? Either way, you're saying you're not allowed to, and the difference is very little. You're losing some of the fuel, maybe, some of the oil. You're not so honorable you're not honoring the candle so much. It's not, who cares? It's not such a big difference. The difference would be the kamadik mishraga l'shraga. If you are lighting from one candle to the other without a piece of wood in between. Sometimes the way you would light from one candle to the other, you would take a match, but not a flammable match, just a small piece, a toothpick or something, a little thicker. You light it. It's called a kesam. You take it, and from there you light the next one. Okay? So if you do it that way, then if you say that the problem is Rav's reasoning is because it's disrespectful, then it's not disrespectful because you're taking properly a match, you're lighting it from this candle, and then you're moving it to the next candle. That's respectful. Nothing wrong. You're not like saying, hey, I need you over here. You're doing it in a nice way. But if you say the problem is achushi mitzvah, that you're weakening the mitzvah somehow, you're taking away from the oil and you're using it up, in that instance, then it would still be forbidden to take with a match or piece of wood from one to the other. The end halacha is the same, that we're not allowed to light from one candle to the other. And we also see the importance of the respect that has to exist for tashmish kedusha, for things that are holy, and for things that are associated with a mitzvah. We treat it with reverence. You have a sefer, you kiss it. When you're done tefillin, you take out, you kiss it. Tzitzis, you kiss. People kiss the mezuzah, or they acknowledge the mezuzah. Things are treated, mitzvahs are treated with respect. Even in regards to the utilitarian needs of it, uses of it, we're still careful that it's done in a respectful way. So basically, light a new match, or use a shamish, which is the best way, and then you light the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Each candle stands on its own. Now we're jumping back to the menorah that was in the Beis Hamikdash, away from Hanukkah for a minute. Mesiv Rav Sheshes asked the following strong question. The Torah tells us, outside of the curtain, from outside of the Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of Holies, on the other side, you set up the menorah. And his question is, does Hashem need a light? It's not like, what's the point of lighting the menorah in this particular spot? It sounds like somehow Hashem needs to have light. He doesn't need light. 40 years we were in the desert. How did we move around? There was a light of Hashem, right? He had a special fire that was above the camp, and that's how we traveled. He doesn't need us to put a menorah to somehow illuminate. What's the point of that? Rather, he explained, the reason why we light a menorah is it's testimony to the people of the world that God's presence, the divine presence known as the Shechina, is dwelling among the Yidden. How do you know that it's dwelling? There's a menorah that's lit in the Beis Hamikdash. Now, something interesting about the menorah. My edus, what's the testimony? Anybody can light a menorah. But what's unique about it? So he said, Amarav Zainer Maravi, this is the Western candle. The way they would do it is they would fill up oil in all the cups equally. Okay, the 7 branches to the menorah, each one had oil. The branch on the west side had the same amount of oil as everything else. And he would start with that one and finish with that one. And by doing that, and even though you started with that, and nonetheless it ended with that, it still lasted for the same amount of time as all of the other ones. Okay. Now, in the morning, they found that all the candles have already been extinguished, but the western one is still lit. But it was the same amount of oil. That was obviously a miracle, which was an indicator, a testimony to all people of the world that the Shechina is dwelling among the Yidden. This is a supernatural type of light. You put a bunch of them equally, you started with that, and you ended, meaning in the morning it's still there. Before you came to prepare the menorah for the next night, it's still lit. And that was a reminder and really an indicator that the Shechina is dwelling among the Yidden. Amar Rav Shua ben Levi. Shua ben Levi said, "Nashim chayaves b'ner Chanukah." Women are required; they're obligated in the lights of Chanukah. Now, they could fulfill it through having the man in the house light it, but if there's no man in the house, they should be lighting it. They're also required. Usually, we say that mitzvahs that are time bound, mitzvahs asay shazman grama, positive mitzvahs which are connected to time, right? You have to daven mincha at a certain time, right? Tefillin has to be done during the day. Tzitzis has to be done during the day. Time-bound mitzvahs, women are exempt from. I'm not going to get into all the reasoning now, but they're exempt from that. The exception, or one of the exceptions, quite a few, is the mitzvah of Chanukah. Candles of Chanukah, which also has to be done in the evening. They're still required to do so. Why? Says Rabbi ben Levi, because they were also part of the miracle. First of all, they were saved. Second of all, Yehudis was very instrumental in the defeat of the Syrian Greeks. Amar Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes said, "Achsenai chayav b'ner Chanukah." Someone that's a guest, he's not at home, he's staying at someone else's house, he's still required in Ner Chanukah. You're not exempt because you're traveling or you're in someone else's house. You still have to, it's not your household, it's someone else's. You have to participate somehow. Amar Reb Zera. Reb Zera said, Meireish, I used to think, once upon a time, or before I heard this teaching, Ki Havena Beirav, when I was a student in yeshiva, says Reb Zera, Mishtatafra befriti badei ushpiza. I would participate with a coin by the place that I would stay. I was in yeshiva somewhere. I stayed in someone's house, and I would give them some money and say, I'm joining in with your menorah. Here's part of the expense, so I'm part of this mitzvah. Basar dinisivi itza, but after I married a wife, Amina, I said, even if I'm traveling, I don't have to do it now. Why? Because because in my house, my wife is home. Someone's lighting in my house. She's lighting, or maybe an older son, but she's lighting. So even though I'm traveling, I'm included in that lighting of my household. So I don't have to pay the guest, the host where I'm staying. Now, this is not halacha. This is a teaching that Rabbi Zeta said. The appropriate thing, the way we behave today, is that if you're traveling, you do light a menorah where you are. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, we're continuing with more teachings from him. He said the following: Kol hashmanim kulon yafin l'ner. All oil is okay for lighting the menorah. V'shemen zayis min hamovchar. But if you have olive oil, that's the best way to light your menorah, with olive oil. Amar Abaye. Abaye said, Meiresh have mehader mara mishcha b'shum shemei. I used to search, not I, but Mar, our master, which is Rabbi, Abaye's teacher, used to search for sesame seed oil. Omar, he said, "Hi, this pulls the light much better." Right? He used to look out and try to get oil from sesame seed oil. We said earlier that you can't use cottonseed oil, but sesame seed oil I used to use it because he used to look for it because it's better for it pulls better into the wick and it's a better flame. Kivan deshmala lahad Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Once I heard the teaching of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, who said that what kind of oil is best? Olive oil. And now Rabbi changed his behavior, and now he searches for olive oil. They're both good, but olive oil is better. He said, still this is a more clear or bright flame than the sesame seed oil. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said another thing, another teaching. When it comes to making ink, the olden days they used to make ink, they would take glass, they would burn it, and the glass would get black, and then they would take various different ingredients, including oil, and they would take off the black from the glass, mix it together with the other things that were going into it, and then they had black ink. So oil was part of the process. So Shlomo Levi said you could use any oil you want to make ink. The shemen zayis min hamovchar, but if you could use olive oil, that's the best. Now, what he's talking about is when it comes to writing Sfarim. So he's talking about Sifrei Torah, Tefillin, and Mezuzos. You should use, if you're using oil in the process of making the ink, you should use olive oil, because that's the best way to illuminate the lights, the eyes of the Yidden who are going to be reading it, learning it, and so on. So he asked him, 1 second, you're telling me that olive oil is best for making ink. There's two parts to making ink. The gabel ila ashen. The way it used to work is they first have to burn something to create black on the glass, and then they scrape it off. It's a whole process, and they mix it with other things, including oil. Which oil are you talking about? The lighting it to turn it into black, to make the glass black, or the oil that gets mixed in afterwards? Which one should be the olive oil? Tashma. So let's learn. Let's answer this. Rabbi Shmuel taught, Kol hashmonim yafim ladyoy. All ink is good for, all oil is good for ink. Shemazayis min hamovchar bein legabel bein laashen. He said it goes for both of them, both for the process of actually liquidifying it into, or congealing it into oil, as well as to the burning it to turn it into the glass black. It matters what kind of oil you use for the burning. The shemazayis min hamovchar, olive oil is the best way to do it. Now, Shmuel Bar Zuta learned it a little bit differently, or there's a different version of how he said it. He said, all oil is good for ink, for all oil and smoke, which is what's making it black, is good for ink. But shemen zayis and olive oil is the best way to go for it. Just conclude with Rav Huna, who said, Rav Huna, all of the burning, which is the inside of a particular branches that are used, or leaves are used, but they're all fine for ink. But the best one is sraf ktof, which is from shemen. It's a smoke that comes out of the twigs of ktof, which we say it in davening. That, he says, is the best way to do it. It's Hashem will continue to